when I started here, I just shared, we are immigrants. We know it. It would be, you guys would laugh about now it's funny, but I have had horrible experiences when it comes to cultural differences, when it comes to, because that's something that also the bill addresses. It's not only language, it's also cultural competency. And when we talked about cultural competency, it's actually that we know because we have lived it. So we were super happy to be part of this project, actually, as immigrants, and I truly believe that this is going to help our community big time. So actually, thank you guys for thinking on the immigrant community on this bill.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited about the project. I'm trying to do the best I can as a team. I'm very grateful. I can't believe I'm here, really. I really thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you. And I promise you, by the time the meeting ends, I'm going to give you my personal cell phone. All right, we'll do that. All right, thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the presentation from the Office of New Americans. And I think before we get to public comment, I do know we have our folk from United Way who will be joining us. If you could please come forward. By the way, Mr. Henry Rosas, I know Madam Chair had to step out, but she told me that I would get in trouble if I didn't point out that she says hello and that your outfit looks very familiar to a session. I'm not sure what she was referring to, sir.
But he does look sharp.
It's great seeing all three of you. Whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you so much, Senator Flores. Henry Rosas for the record. We are just working on pulling up the presentation here. Can you all see that presentation okay behind me? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chair, members of the committee. So excited to be back in a familiar space. Henry Rosas for the record. Really excited to share, I think, what is one of probably United Way's one of the most signature projects, especially as it relates to the topic at hand today, language access. We are not robots, we don't run train systems, but we are here to talk about language access. And we promise we will be brief. We know we've all had a long day, but really excited to share a lot of the public-facing tools that we offer, not just for the nonprofit sector, but also for our government partners, and share really the work that we're doing to enhance language access services and implementation across Southern Nevada. So just really quickly about United Way. So United Way Southern Nevada's core mission is to unite people to improve people's lives. And I think that the Language Access Project really speaks to that. As you'll hear from my colleagues, this project really came to be from convening nonprofits, government, community leaders, during the height of the COVID pandemic. And we know that in times of crisis, it's really that unity that brings and inspires really the most consequential solutions to the issues that we face. And that is the approach and practice that we take to not just our language access work, but also to the other programs and services that we provide, from pre-K to free tax preparation services. So today we're excited to talk about the $1 million language access project that is now years in the making, share our current implementation and the public tools that actually today we are just launching for our partners, and then share continuing challenges and solutions for future language access policy. You know, I'm so grateful that the state has had momentum in the legislature, both in the 2021 and 23 sessions relating to language access, and so really excited to see what next year will hold. But before we dive into all of that, would love to just introduce my colleagues from United Way of Southern Nevada.
Abelman, sir, for the record, thank you all for having us today. I serve as the project manager responsible for overseeing and managing the United Way of Southern Nevada Language Access Project. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Flores and members of the committee. Janet Quintero, I serve as the Vice President of External Affairs at United Way of Southern Nevada. I've been at United Way for about 5 years now, And I have to say this is one of the most significant projects. I'm also an immigrant, so I'm really excited to talk to you about language access and what this means to removing barriers to access for our community. So here in our next slide, you'll see the need was always there, but definitely the COVID-19 pandemic heightened the awareness of the need and the flow of information and barriers. So language access is just a barrier to access. I know we talk about other barriers, transportation, but communication is definitely a key one. I'll always share an example of, we know there was rental assistance out there, but it wasn't really reaching every single member of the community, and at United Way, we kept hearing about that. Then throughout early 2020 and the rest of the year, we continued hearing this feedback. You'll see the community-informed process. United Way does host 2 community forums, the Nonprofit Connection, and then the Spanish version of that, the Junta Comunitaria, and we kept hearing about the needs of the community, not only the nonprofit sector, but of the private sector, and both the short-term and long-term needs of language access. It was at this point that we started really drafting and actively pursuing language access as an initiative, because we realized that we had education programs, we had workforce programs, but they weren't really reaching the community in the way that we were hoping to. And with that, we really focused on statewide cross-sector collaboration. So of course, United Way is a nonprofit, and we work with the nonprofit sector, but we see the value of cross-sector collaboration, and I think you'll see that in this project. And here in the next slide, I will dive more into that. So the cross-sector language access meeting has been convening since August of 2022. On the right-hand side there, you'll see a couple of the members. And I do want to highlight that the Governor's Office for New Americans has been a member of this group since the beginning. The group is focused in regional coordination to remove barriers to access. So we have we're lucky to have $1 million congressional appropriation, and we know that there is state funding. We just heard a little bit about that. So we're here to add and to maximize those funds. An example of this collaboration is United Way actively utilizes the toolkit that ONA created with our nonprofits. Of course, we will have to repurpose it and adapt it to serve the need of the nonprofit, but there wasn't a need for us to completely recreate something new when there were already resources allocated towards that purpose here in our state. So now more about how we successfully received the $1 million that allowed us to really pursue this work. Here in the next slide, you will see that the Federal Community Project funding process, we began this process in early 2022 in partnership with the Office of Congresswoman Dina Titus. And I did want to just express my appreciation, because I know that this wouldn't be possible without the advocacy of Chair Torres and Councilwoman Olivia Diaz. So again, this is an example of not only cross-sector collaboration, but across different levels of government. For the timeline, we received notice of approval in December 2022 when the congressional budget was approved, with a start date of September of 2023. So this $1 million community project funding is managed by the Department of Health and Human Services, and we have an anticipated 18-month timeline ending in March 2024. And I do apologize, I realize there's a typo in the slide. It says May 2024, it should be March 2024. But of course, we're actively looking for support to continue this program, because we know that we won't solve these issues in 18 months. So we are actively continuing to look for support in both the private and public sector. We wanted to highlight a quote from Congresswoman Dina Titus, and I know you've all received it, so I won't read it all, but I will go to that last sentence there. This funding will help serve individuals from different backgrounds more effectively seek housing, employment, healthcare, and other assistance, creating a more inclusive Nevada and bolstering our local economy. And I specifically think that last phrase, creating a more inclusive Nevada and bolstering our local economy, is how we feel about this language access work. It is really creating opportunity for all Nevadans. And for this next slide, I will pass it along to my colleague, Abel.
Perfect, thank you. Abel Mansuri for the record. So there are 3 main components to this project. Component number 1, 12 nonprofits developing and or enhancing their language access plan. 12 subawardees have been selected through an application process, reviewed and voted upon by steering committee members made up of language access champions from multiple local government agencies. Each subawardee received $25,000 to develop and or enhance their language access plan, covering 9 languages that are mostly spoken in our community aside from English. These languages include American Sign Language, Amharic, Ethiopian, Arabic, Chinese, Farsi Dari, Korean, Spanish, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. These languages have been selected based on census data, CCSD input from 2023, and the SB 246 presentation. Component number 2 of the project, translation, interpretation, and over-the-phone translation services provided at no cost to the subawardees, community nonprofits, and local government agencies. United Way of Southern Nevada used the state-approved vendor list to procure our translation and interpretation vendor. Our final selection was Propio due to cost, quality of service, and the ability to process high volume of translation demands and ability to translate in over 300 languages. The third and final component of our project is the technical, educational, programmatic, and multicultural workshops. Organizing and hosting monthly workshops to assist subawardees in developing their language access plan. The initial workshops focused on programmatic and educational aspects, but now we are transitioning to more multicultural workshops that are open to the public. Now, in this next slide, you'll be able to see our 12 nonprofits, or as we like to call them, our 12 language access partners, along with the languages they cover. And it is worth mentioning that some of them cover more than the 9 languages that we spoke about in the project, such as Southern Paiute, Ukrainian, and Russian. We did not want to limit our subawardees to the 9 languages. We want them to cover as many languages as they want, and that is our long-term partner, our long-term goal. On to the next slide. Now we have the budget allocation, and I would like to mention that the 2 largest portions of the budget allocations will go to the nonprofit awards and the interpretation and language services. Thank you. I'll hand it over to my colleague.
Janet Quintero for the record. So now you've heard about kind of like the beginnings of really this pursuing language access as a program and the technical aspects of the work, including the workshops. And I did want to just highlight that the workshops are also focusing on federal and public funding compliance for our nonprofit partners. We understood not all of them may have that experience, so we intentionally added that to the support that we offer them. So now that you've heard about the technical aspects, we did want to share 2 stories, and just being mindful of your time, I won't read it all, but here you see one from Lighthouse Charities, and of course all the credit goes to our language access partners, but they are actively changing lives, and this is only the first quarterly report that we have received. Gizma is new to Lighthouse Charities and the ESL classes. She speaks Arabic, but she does not read it or write it, and ever since she began taking classes, her confidence has grown. So this is an example of what Congresswoman Titus expressed in her quote. Really, this is creating opportunities for people to pursue their long-term goals. I know that you also all have our Q1 report that we submitted to our federal funder as an attachment. So I do encourage you to read that and reach out to us if you have any questions. Here on the second example, you see a story from Asian Community Development Council. And this is an older gentleman whose first language is Vietnamese. He received all the care he needed in his language. And of course, now he'll be more likely to come back and receive that medical service that he needs. And then a third example that was not included here, but I think it's important to mention, is only last week United Way convened with the World Affairs Council to host a Moroccan delegation to talk about policy initiatives around our human trafficking work. So again, this is the scope of language access in our community, and I think that as a state we are taking active steps to become more inclusive. And for the next slide, I'll pass it along to Henry.
Henry Rosas for the record. So now you've heard really kind of how this project started, the real world impact that this has, and now we kind of look to the year ahead. So we're continuing to develop and implement tools for our funded partners, for government agencies, and for the social service sector at large. I'll touch on the language access line in the next couple of slides, but I think to the committee's point about outreach and equity as it relates to language access, like we were very intentional, and I think that the nonprofit sector is a really good example of being able to meet the needs very quickly of our community. I think the language translation line will serve as a good example of that in the forthcoming slides. But this project really is that its foundational elements really focused on equity and meeting the needs of our community. To just touch on 2 quick points, we, again, as you have heard, Assembly Bill 480 funding that will be available in the next fiscal year to state agencies. That's something that is very important to us and will allow state agencies to fully implement their language access plans and programs that now they will be undergoing their second iteration of those plans. In 2022, when those plans were first submitted, those agencies collectively had requested about $5.2 million. So we're very excited to see those agencies now be able to receive some funding to implement those programs. And we're still the conveners, and we're still looking for more solutions to this work. We'll be hosting a language access summit that this committee will be invited to, and we still continue our cross-sector working group to try to continue to collaborate and find best practices and solutions to the language access work that we are really in the depths of this year. So now talking about the immediate needs, I think that there's a way to approach this work of like the immediate needs that our community requires, and then maybe more the long-term strategies that kind of will touch on some of the maybe legislative priorities that could come up in the next legislative session. But really in the immediate, we know that our community needs interpretation and translation services. And we're fortunate that a big portion of this project is a language access phone line that is available to nonprofit and government agencies beginning today. So we have shared the phone line to our partners. Essentially, folks will be able to call a number. They'll just have to provide their first and last name and zip code, and they'll be connected to an interpreter within 60 seconds. A portion of that work as well is document translation. So as you saw on the previous slide, Opportunity 180 and Legal Aid of Southern Nevada have taken us up on this opportunity to translate their materials in Spanish and Tagalog. So as we think of the ways that we can reach our community, not just through civic engagement, through legal services, through healthcare, language access is at the center of that, and the translation line really is kind of the first step in meeting that immediate need. And we're hoping to share data by the end of the year to this committee because, as you can see, we get data on which languages are most used. We'll get data on which zip codes are in most need, and then which agencies are utilizing the phone line. So we're excited to provide that to be able to inform data-driven solutions to the legislature as it relates to language access. And now moving on to the longer term strategies, and I think as we've worked not just with our own project, but also with our government and nonprofit partners, there's a couple of ideas that we have been kind of honing in on, but also that the legislature has also focus on, particularly in the last legislative session. So one of those strategies for meeting language access needs is really investigating federal funding sources. Assembly Bill 383, which would have codified the right to reproductive health services. Section 8 of that bill provided a match from the federal government from Medicaid to be able to match the funding that the state would put up for translation and interpretive services for folks that are seeking reproductive health care. So that is a mechanism that there's federal funds on the table to help fund this work. And we want to continue to explore those types of mechanisms that are easy reaches and that would, again, impact the lives of folks that are trying to access social services. And the second, as you've heard from the previous presentation as well, is building the multilingual and multicultural workforce. And I think this also extends not just at the state level. I think that's a lot of the recommendations that we saw from the 2022 language access plans that many of the state agencies put forth, but it's also across the nonprofit and private sectors. So as you saw from the Lighthouse Charities example, and they do this work day in, day out, right? They'll have someone who is a refugee or a newly arrived individual They, enroll in ESL classes, and now they're looking for work. So a potential solution and creating a feedback loop of, this individual can become a certified translator at one of the programs within our entry institutions, then become a certified translator, kind of run that business, and then train others to become interpreters and translators. That's just one feedback loop that can really alleviate the desperate shortage that we have here across the state, really, for interpreters and translation services. So I think these are just a couple of examples of really the needs that we need to build for our workforce. But again, we're building short-term solutions, but these longer-term solutions are ones that we're hoping to partner with from the private sector and with the legislature as well. But with that, we're excited to answer any questions that you might have. But we're just, again, really thankful to be here today and to be hopefully the last presentation of the day.
And we also appreciate your patience. I know you've been here pretty much the entire day waiting alongside of us, so thank you for that. Members, any questions? We'll start up north. Senator Daley, any questions, or anybody? Senator Hansen, anyone? No? We'll come back to Southern Nevada. Assemblyman De Silva, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but just more so just a thank you. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing for our communities, for our state here. I'm looking forward to achieving even more this upcoming legislative session. So thank you all.
Yeah, just giving you a shout out. Anything else? No, well, again, thank you for the work. And obviously, as I mentioned previously, anything we can do to help force us to work, please. This is something that we're very passionate about, but you're ground zero, right? You're doing it, you're doing the work. So whatever we have to do, make us step up to the plate and help you. So thank you for the work. With that, we'll go ahead and close out your presentation. And we'll go to the last item on the agenda, which is public comment. We'll start off with those who are either online or over the phone.
Chair, your public line is open and working, but you have no callers at this time.
Thank you. And I do not know if there's anybody in the audience in Northern Nevada wishing to join us for public comment.
No, there's none.
Okay. Sounds good. And there's also nobody here in Las Vegas, but I'll just say it for clarity, anybody wishing to join us for public comment here in Southern Nevada. Seeing none, I just want to say thank you to our amazing staff, LCB, and everybody who was here for a very long meeting with us. So I just wanted to say thank you to you all. This meeting's adjourned.